The Black Frog Jig. I wrote this a long time ago. I was in a band in Galway. My first ever band was called Black Oak, and we used to lovingly refer to the band as Black Frog. And I wrote a jig and I called it The Black Frog. I haven't composed a ton of tunes, and this is one that I wrote without any banjo at all. I completely wrote it in my own head, out of my own head, as I was walking in and out to college many years ago in Dublin. It seems to be a very popular tune. I recorded it on my first album, Pick It Up, which came out in the year 2000. If you can believe it was that long ago. The opening track, two tunes that I wrote, The Black Frog and The Sanctuary. And now we're going to take a close look at the tune, The Black Frog, break it down, talk a little bit about picking, about fingering, about ornamentation, jig rhythm, which of course is always a very interesting conversation. And then we're going to throw in a whole load of fun stuff into it, including lots of chords, double stops, and double string triplets, which are a favorite of mine. So I hope you enjoy this lesson for the jig, The Black Frog. By the end of this video, we're going to learn to play the Black Frog jig in 3 different ways. Of course, we're going to look at ornamentation, and we're going to break that into 2 different lessons. So essentially, there's 2 different ways to play ornaments and jigs that give different flavors or different styles. We're going to explore the tune using chords and harmony. We're also going to focus on a way to improve jig rhythm in a rather subtle fashion that a lot of banjo players use. They move the emphasis for the melody back to the second note of the bar rather than the first note. And I'll explain that in more detail. As always, everything is fully notated and transcribed in ABC, stave notation and tab, and that's available on my Patreon, Enda Scahill Banjo. You'll see the link in the corner and also in the pinned comment. If you'd like to skip ahead to the end, I have a very slow version of the tune for you to learn. And don't forget that on Patreon, you'll also get access to 3 play-along tracks with backing tracks, and they're at various BPM. So on this, we have them on 80, 90, and 110 so that you can practice playing faster. There's nothing too tricky about any of the pick work or the finger work, but in the second half, it's worth noting that because there are so many arpeggios and there are string crossings that happen both on the way down and on the way up, there are 2 options. One, we can continue with the very jig dominant rhythm of down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, and there's no problem doing that. And here's the second part with the string crossings and the arpeggios using down, up, down, down, up, down. Some of you might be more comfortable with down, up, down, up because of where the string crossings are happening. And so that looks like this. I'm going to slow it down a little bit. Okay, so rather than it being down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, we're going to play down, up, down, up, down, up. And that might feel more natural to some folks. That's known as alternate picking. There is some economy picking options in it. It's not my forte, but I absolutely can see the benefit of doing it for certain arpeggiated passages. And that's where we're doing 2 downs or 2 ups. And for tunes like this, sometimes that can be helpful, particularly if it's played at speed. I would say get very familiar with alternate picking, down, up, down, down, up, down, and the down, up, down, up, which they're both largely the same. And then experiment with some economy picking and see what it feels like. I do find, dare I say, that is one of the occasions that a very light bracing of the index finger on the head can help when you're doing two downs or two ups. I would definitely find this anytime that I do any kind of cross picking, that the bracing helps control the hand when you're doing that economy picking motion. It's worth experimenting with. The more options that you have and the more flexibility you have in picking, always going to be the best scenario. Let's talk jig rhythm, and there's a very subtle way to bring swing and bounce to jigs. Now it does involve essentially changing the tune, right? But a lot of players do this, and I do it myself from time to time. It's best described as taking the note of the melody and pushing it back one note, and essentially putting a pickup note beforehand. It might be best to play some examples of it and then talk about it a little bit. So some examples are pretty easy to spot in the second part of this tune. And this is just to kind of describe what's happening. So in that section where we're hitting the high A, right, so that's the original notes of the tune. And instead of playing the high A, we're going to play a G sharp first. And so we're kind of leaning in to the note below the note that's in the tune. So you're creating this da 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 da. It's where you're the first beat of the bar, which is the downbeat. We're playing a semitone, sometimes a tone below the actual note of the tune. So it means that the melody is always kind of just leaning just below the melody, if you wish. And so what that does, I think, is it creates a kind of a natural swing, because you're kind of later coming to the melody, if that makes any sense. And here's the opposite. So when you lean into the first note of the bar on the melody, you're going to create that sense of expediency. When we change it up so that we're playing a note below the note in the melody first, it gives it more pull and push. So here's the whole tune played. We're going to leave out ornamentation entirely, but I'm going to focus very much on those pickup notes and bringing the focus of the tune to the note below the note that's in the melody at the start of each bar. See, can you tell the difference? Hopefully you can hear what I'm talking about. A similar technique to create two different styles of jig rhythm is to use different types of ornamentation. So an ornament in a jig is going to be 1, 2, 3, 1, or 1, 1, 2, 3. So what that means is that we're going to do the triplet at the head of the bar, on the beat, or we're going to put a note before the triplet. And the difference is, let's do the very, very first bar of the tune. Okay. This is where we're putting a note before the triplet. If we put the triplet first, right at the head of the bar, it's the same number of notes, we're just reversing the triplet. So the triplet comes first, da 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 da. And the other way is to put the note first and put the triplet second. There's a very subtle difference. One, to my ear, sounds much more lyrical because we're putting this longer downbeat note before the triplet, and that gives a kind of a lyrical swing to the tune. Whereas the other way, by putting the triplet first, again, that creates that sense of urgency. So two different ways of playing it. So I'm going to play the tune through once. Each part is repeated. So the first 8 bars of the first part, I'm going to play it with the long note first. The second 8 bars, I'm going to put the triplet first. I'm going to see if you can tell the difference between the two. Hopefully you can. So definitely, to my ear, when we put the triplet first, we're getting right in there. It's much more brash. It's more bold sounding because we're coming right in, right on the beat with that triplet. And the reverse gives much more swing. It's as much about the emphasis. When we put the longer note first and the triplet second, we can play the long note a little bit. When I say long note, it's a quaver. We can play it ever so slightly softer than the triplet. And so that is even in itself is creating this ebb and flow. Whereas when we do the triplet first, we can really accentuate the rhythm. So using ornamentation and those pickup notes that we were talking about earlier, we can create two very different versions of the tune. And I'm going to do that now. We're going to play the tune twice through. The first time we're going to use those pickup notes where we're shifting the emphasis of the melody, and we're going to use the longer form triplets where we're putting the triplet second. When we go around the other time, we're going to focus on making it very brash, very proud, and come straight in with the strong rhythm. So hopefully you can hear the difference between the two. Let me know in the comments which one you prefer. hope you can tell the difference between the two. Fascinated to know which one you prefer. Make sure you drop a comment and let me know which one. Let's look at some chords. I do have 3 backing tracks for this, and on SoundSlice via Patreon you can play along with the backing track, leaving out almost all of the banjo if you wish, or you can play along with me, but the chords are marked out on that. But we're going to add in some double stops and try and add some different texture and flavor through the tune. Now, as always, my G is tuned up to A, which, because we're in the key of D, will give me some flexibility when it comes to catching D chords by using the D note on the G string, which is now at fret 5 instead of fret 7. That just makes life a little easier. There's a whole lot of stuff going on there, so let's break it down a little bit. In the first half, we're using a lot of double string chords, using both the low A and the open A. And by making it almost quite cluttered by adding in lots of these double stops, we can provide contrast by then playing it cleanly another time round of the tune. So this is almost like muddying the waters. Now for me, what I would do in that instance, at the start of the tune, lots of double stops. And then when the tune hits that high D, I'm going to play a D and an F sharp chord, which is chord of D, but staccato it. So play it and kill it very fast. And you do that by pressing down, leaving your fingers in place, and then lifting them off so they stop the string from resonating. And you get a little pause. A bit of resonance from the banjo, but in comparison to. And this kind of creates that pause. It kind of bookends that section, which is very busy. And then we can play out the rest of that first part with a little bit of cleanness in the playing. By putting that little bump note, it kind of justifies making the start of that first part very dirty and very muddy with lots of double string chords. Second half, loads of opportunities for interesting things to happen. So a lot of those are double string triplets, where we're playing the chord and then we're continuing the triplet on the single string. But it sounds nice. Especially when you do a number of them in a row, because you're kind of almost getting into that counter melody section. That's a lot of fun to play. Easier to play it at this kind of slow pace, because if you got up to 110 BPM with that, it's a little more tricky. Let's have one round of the tune with lots of ornamentation, lots of chords, passing notes, the whole shebang. I hope you enjoyed all that. Lots to think about, certainly in terms of the rhythm, the ornamentation. There's definitely a huge amount of challenging things in that chord sequence. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe, hit the like button. I'd love to hear from you in the comments if these lessons are hitting home with you and what tune you would like to see me tackle next.